You're listening to Horizontal Power Hour, your source for anarchist thought, culture, and politics. I'm today's host, Kehaulani Kauanui. On today's show, we'll be learning about the state of anarchist studies as an area of critical inquiry. It includes research, scholarship, education, and theorization that is about anarchism and/or informed by anarchism. This episode of Horizontal Power Hour will feature interviews with one of the organizers of the first North American Anarchist Studies Network Conference and two others who are now organizing the second annual North American Anarchist Studies Network, that is the NAASN conference. I'll tell you more momentarily, but first I want to let listeners know that Horizontal Power Hour is planned and produced by a collective called the Dream Committee. While we are continuously constructing our own process for making decisions and for creating our show, we have a basic model we work under. At present, we're made up of 12 members, all with differing perspectives, backgrounds, and interests. We share in the process of planning, producing, and broadcasting the show every other week. Members meet regularly to discuss and evaluate our process to try and ensure that all decisions we make are consented to by the entire group. We focus our attention on the process of our own group, both with the goal of eliminating hierarchy and coercion internally, and with the conviction that ultimately our politics are not about a distant, idyllic, or utopic future, but about recreating the world around us right now. Each episode is hosted and produced by self-selected members of the collective on a rotating basis. I'd also like to remind listeners that the views expressed on the show are my own and in no way reflect the views and opinions of Wesleyan University or the WESU management. For that matter, what I present here does not even represent the Anarchist Radio Collective. As I mentioned at the start of the show, our interview segments today focus on new developments in anarchist studies, research, scholarship, education, and theorization that is about anarchism and/or informed by anarchism. While the Anarchist Studies Network in Britain has focused on an official specialist group of the Political Studies Association in the UK for some time, the formalization of a network in North America is more recent. The inaugural North American Anarchist Studies Network Conference, which was initiated by Derek Shannon, Abby Willis, Luis Fernandez, Nathan Junn, and Jesse Cohn, was held in Hartford, Connecticut, USA on November 21st through the 22nd, 2009. Since then, the North American Anarchist Studies Network, also known as NAASN, has been thriving, and the second annual conference will take place on January 15th through the 16th, 2011, that is just next month, at the Steelworkers Hall in Toronto, Canada. I'll be playing you interviews with one of the organizers of the first NAASN conference, as well as an interview I did with two other people currently organizing the second annual conference. Before I play the interviews, though, I want to read some excerpts from the Statement of Purpose of the NAASN. This was produced in January 2010. The North American Anarchist Studies Network, NAASN, is intended, 1, to serve as a means of mutual support for North American anarchists engaged in intellectual work, both theoretical and empirical. 2, to facilitate and promote anarchist studies by bringing together students, academics, and independent scholars and activists from across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And 3, to provide a space for critical dialogue and reflection on anarchism. We understand anarchist studies as research, scholarship, education, and theorization that is about anarchism and/or informed by anarchism, developing distinctly anarchist scholarly practices, methods of study, epistemologies, ways of knowing. We understand anarchism in general terms as the practice of equality and freedom in every sphere of life, conceived and lived without domination in any form. We understand this practice to belong not only to a better future, but to the here and now, where we strive to prefigure our ends in the means we choose to reach them. As such, anarchism is a distinct tradition with a specific history, rooted in the aspirations and experiences of a particular working-class movement. At the same time, it is a set of principles and possibilities that are the property of no one movement, no one thinker, and no one place or time. The many ways in which these principles have been interpreted and these possibilities realized may serve us as a continuing source of inspiration, Articulating the unity within this plurality, lending it greater coherence, may be part of our continuing task. Although many of us engage in anarchist studies from within existing institutions, such as universities, we do not see our projects as confined to those institutions, and we are committed to making sure they do not share the limitations of official academia. As such, membership in the NAASN is open to all, regardless of academic affiliation or lack thereof. To these ends, members of the NAASN will hold a yearly North American Anarchist Studies Conference, organize working groups around our specific interests, pursue collaboration with other groups and institutions sharing our purposes, and provide a platform for other projects consistent with our purposes. And that's the end of the excerpt I'm reading. That is on the website of the North American Anarchist Studies Network, and you can check out more information, including the membership directory in those working groups, by going online. I want to acknowledge that although I am a member of the network, I did not take part in actually formulating that statement, and I want to make sure credit is given where credit's due. That was formulated by the original initiators who I mentioned earlier. And so now, shifting gears here, I'm going to be playing you an interview I did with the one of the initiators, Cohn, who is an associate professor of English at Purdue University North Central. He was one of the organizers for the first NAASN conference. He translates the work of French and Spanish-speaking anarchists into English and writes extensively on anarchist theory and history, especially in the area of culture. He is also the author of a book titled Anarchism and the Crisis of Representation. And here we'll get started with the interview with Cohn, and I'll be following that up with the another interview I did with two other organizers shortly after. Here we go. Thank you so much for joining us on the Horizontal Power Hour. I want to ask you if you could start by telling our listeners how you came to be involved in the field of anarchist studies.
Oh boy. Well, I had really been just very, very passionate and interested in both anarchism and literature at the same time, and I'd been looking for ways to marry those two interests for a long time. I did a dissertation that was looking at the idea of anarchist literary theory, a subject that I had no idea existed. I thought it didn't exist. I thought I would have to invent the whole thing. And what I discovered is that there's so much history and theory that's been forgotten, ignored, or just has been locked away in other languages and never translated into English. And so that's sort of how I acquired the vocation of translator.
And that's for your work with French and Spanish-speaking anarchists?
Yes.
Now, I want to shift and ask how you and four other people came to be the key initiators of the inaugural North American Anarchist Studies Network Conference. For our listeners who don't know about that, it was held in Hartford, Connecticut on November 21st through the 22nd in 2009. And Jesse, I attended that, and I was so inspired to be there. How did that development come about?
Oh, I should not exaggerate my role in it at all. Derek and Abby and Luis Fernandez kind of shanghaied me, and I went along with it, and I'm so glad that I did, and Nathan John, I should say. But I think it came about partly because of jealousy. We'd been watching for several years now the progress of the Anarchist Studies Network based in the UK. And they've just been doing some amazing things and really sort of holding some incredible events. And we thought, why do we have to go over there to participate? Let's do something like this, on our own continent. And so this came about, and we were really blown away by the response to it.
It was great. 2 full days, and as I remember, over 350 participants.
Something like, we were just glad that the word got out so well.
That's great. In terms of the name, the North American Anarchist Studies Network, would you be up for speaking about sort of going beyond the USA, which a lot of people unfortunately think of the U.S. as the only thing in North America? How do Canada and Mexico fit in there?
Oh, we hope... We hope a lot. we had some Canadian participation in the first conference, and we're really looking to hold eventually to hold a conference in Mexico. Mm-hmm. For some reason, it's been really kind of difficult actually to find links to Mexican participants. The Anarchist Studies seems to be really catching on like wildfire in other parts of Latin America. There are well-organized groups and conferences mm-hmm. in Chile, in Colombia, but for some reason, it seems like it's not caught on quite as quickly in Mexico. Mm-hmm. And in Canada, this kind of thing has been going gangbusters for quite some time. Mm-hmm. There were some important precedents for the Hartford conference happening in places like Edmonton as early as 2003. Mm-hmm. So, mm-hmm. But we're hoping to keep this a movable feast.
Yes.
And to rotate the conferences around between the three countries.
Right, and the next one being in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And so the next location for 2012 will be decided after the Toronto conference? I
think so. Mm-hmm. I think it's sort of on a volunteer basis. Some group of foolhardy people has to stand up and say, we'd like to host this.
Right. I also want to acknowledge that the network consciously includes academics as well as grassroots scholars. Can you speak more to the importance of that inclusion?
Yeah. Well, one of the things personally that I've been really inspired by, two things. That I'd been to the conference in Edmonton and to a more recent one in Manchester, England. Mm-hmm. That both really kind of pulled in involvement from academics and from people who are outside the academy. In Edmonton, particularly, there were people there doing labor history panels that included people from labor unions. Mm. There were panels that were staffed by activists in indigenous rights and Dalit issues and so forth. And in addition to that, truly transdisciplinary. There were ethnomusicologists there. Mm-hmm. There were art historians, sociologists. Really transdisciplinary.
That's great.
So it made for some great cross-fertilization, mm-hmm. and I wanted to see that happen again in the U.S.
Oh, right on. Could you say more about the development of intellectual work on and within anarchism? I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking of is here at Wesleyan University, where I teach, when I started to very slowly, and I've only done this with a few people, mention this new radio program that the Anarchist Radio Collective is producing, Horizontal Power Hour. Mm-hmm. Colleagues really just kind of chuckle under their breath and try and change the subject.
Yes.
And you mentioned earlier about the history and theory being hidden and ignored, and this is an erased, subjugated knowledge, and I just wonder if you could speak to sort of what it means to do anarchist studies in the academy.
Polite laughter actually is a pretty common response, and sort of maybe the best response you could hope for. It's astonishing that if you could think of the academy as being kind of this repository of public knowledge, right? This is sort of like society's brain cells devoted to things like remembering the past. Mm. And yet there's more amnesia about anarchist history in the academy in some ways than outside of it. Mm-hmm. That's changing, I think, but it's changing slowly. Mm-hmm. And so it's astonishing, like, to see that, you know, outsider historians often do a better job than historians inside when it comes to anarchism.
Right. I also wanted to ask you, you are the author of Anarchism and the Crisis of Representation. Could you tell us a bit about that text and also any new projects you're working on?
Well, the first book was an attempt to kind of really recover some of the foundations of an anarchist literary theory, mm-hmm. Which is primarily I wanted to look at how anarchists actually understood the idea of representation, both in the sense of speaking for somebody else and in the sense of creating signs that stand for something else. Mm-hmm. And the way that those two kinds of representation are interrelated. It's a very technical book, and I think kind of dry and boring and overpriced as well. So don't buy it. Steal it from your library. The next book that I'm working on, hopefully, will be a much better read, and it's going to be called Underground Passages: Anarchist Resistance Culture, 1848 to the Present. I'm really sort of looking at how anarchists created everything from poetry and song to body cultures to novels and plays and so forth that enable them to kind of hold out against these sort of overwhelming cultural and economic forces.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of keep hope alive in the face of really overwhelming odds?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, for decades and decades, they really managed to create this kind of alternate world of anarchist culture that they could spend a lot of their lives inside.
Well, anything you'd like to leave us with in terms of how listeners might want to tune in to developments from the North American Anarchist Studies Network and future conferences?
Well, if I could speak kind of from my own corner of the activity. We really want to make this a trilingual, at least kind of organization, French, Spanish, English, and people who have even a smidgen of ability to speak any other language besides English have something really important to contribute, more than you think. Particularly when it comes to texts, it's much easier to translate text than it is to translate speech. And so if you have any inclination, it really is an important kind of thing to contribute. You can be what the philosopher Gilles Deleuze called a relay. And you can facilitate the exchange of knowledge between movements that otherwise are kind of operating in the dark by themselves.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us on Horizontal Power Hour. Hope to meet you at the next conference.
All right. Same here.
And again, that was Jesse Cohn speaking about the inaugural North American Anarchist Studies Network conference that was held in Hartford in 2009, Hartford, Connecticut, USA. And he's talking more generally about recent developments in anarchist studies. You're listening to WESU Middletown 88.1, all the way to the left of your dial. This is Horizontal Power Hour, your source for anarchist thought, culture, and politics. Next up, I'll be playing you an interview I did with Tammy Kovich and Jasmin Mujanovic. They're currently organizing the second annual conference of the North American Anarchist Studies Network, which will be held in Toronto next month. Oh, I should mention, too, I want to be sure to introduce them properly. Tammy Kovich is an activist and graduate student from Toronto, Ontario, who is currently working on a Ph.D. in political science at York University. Her research interests predominantly center on the theorization of dissent and the exploration of radical political theory, in particular anarchist theory. She tells me she admittedly spends far too much time neglecting her scholarly work for organizing and is constantly struggling to navigate what can at times seem to be the irreconcilable divide between activism and academia. Jasmin Mujanovic is an anarchist organizer, and he tells me he's an accordion enthusiast who is also a political science Ph.D. student at York University. Originally from Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Jasmin has additionally resided in Croatia, Slovenia, and Germany. He is particularly interested in anarchist and anarchic approaches to anti-colonialism and anti-nationalism, especially in the Balkans. He's a proud member of the NAASN since November 2009, and he tells me he is deathly afraid of moths. Here we go. Great to have you both on the line. Tammy in Toronto and Jasmin currently in northern Cyprus.
Thank you so much.
Indeed.
I wanted to start by asking each of you if you could briefly tell our listeners how you got involved in anarchist studies to begin with.
Okay, well, I had followed the developments going on with forming the network for a while. Unfortunately, I had a previous commitment during the time of the first conference, but I did tell a good friend and colleague of mine that I'm working on my Ph.D. with Jasmin about the conference. He was able to attend. He came back and we spent some time talking about the conference and how great it would be, we both thought, if we could bring the next conference to Canada perhaps. And when the call went out over the listserv to organize the second conference, we jumped at the opportunity to try to bring it to Toronto.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was kind of a whirlwind. I had actually not been aware of the existence of the network. I'd been aware of the existence of a similar network based out of Britain primarily, the Anarchist Studies network over there. And Tammy informed me of this great opportunity, that there was a call for papers and that it was going to be in Hartford, which is relatively close to Toronto. And I think there was only something like 3 or 4 days left before the deadline. But I had an idea that I was tossing around in my brain for a while, so I kind of, just plopped something down on paper and sent it off, not thinking very much of it, but excited about the existence of the network. All the same, I was very fortunate enough to have my humble little proposal accepted by the organizers, and I went down to Hartford a few weeks later, and it was absolutely fantastic, and there was incredible people there doing incredible research, and most of all, everyone was really excited about the existence of the network and the potential that it had. And as Tammy said, once I got back to Toronto and we started talking about it, we both thought, that hosting the second conference was something that we were both very much interested in. And so, a few months later, here we are.
I did attend the Hartford conference, which I agree was absolutely fantastic. Regarding the Toronto conference, I noticed that it will take place at the Steelworkers Hall. Could you both speak to, or one of you speak to, why that choice of location rather than, say, York University?
Well, for us, it was really important, actually, for the conference not to be held at a traditional academic venue. One of the main drives of the network is the idea of being an anarchist academic, broadly defined, which isn't going to entail people who are necessarily graduate students or tenured professors, but people who do independent research, people who are community organizers, people who are activists, and setting it in a space that is more geared to that diversity was something that we wanted to sort of set up from the onset.
I think, at least for me, it speaks to the very heart of what I understand to be anarchist studies, in the sense that it's not merely the academic study of anarchism or even the approach of non-anarchist subjects through an anarchist lens, but rather, so to say, the study of how to be anarchists and how to advance anarchist projects. And as such, it was, as Tammy very aptly said, it was really important to us that we move away from institutional, traditional, often very hierarchical academic settings and really make it something that everybody could be involved in. Anybody who had an interest in anarchism as such and, took anarchism seriously. I think the prime motivation.
And I like how you both have stressed how anarchist here is broadly defined. I think that people having very narrow ideas of what constitutes anarchism, anarchist theory and praxis, has a lot to do with how it's misunderstood, and obviously that's something that academics have to deal with actually in the academy too, in terms of misrecognition for anarchist studies as an intellectual project. Could you speak to that perhaps?
There's certainly a tension, I would say right off the bat within the anarchist community about, whether or not it is even appropriate for anarchists to have so to say, an out role in the academy. Because, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, it is an incredibly institutionalized setting. It is an incredibly hierarchical setting. It is often a very patriarchal, heteronormative setting. It is the old white boys club in many respects. So trying to do something different, especially of an anarchist variety in that setting, is oftentimes really challenging. And I think some people oftentimes make very convincing arguments for the idea that it is, a lost cause in so many respects. All the same, I mean, for me personally, it is nonetheless, it is a space where ostensibly people are there to be exposed to new ideas. And, be that as it may about everything that I've said about, the negatives of academia and institutionalized education as a whole, at least for myself, I've always felt that we are presented to a limited extent with an opportunity to present new ideas to people and do it in a manner that is, as an anarchist, I feel that when I engage with my students, I do feel that I can kind of have an opportunity to really, to use a term, sell them on the idea, or at least expose them to it. Mm-hmm. And in my experience, it actually oftentimes is quite a fortuitous experiment, though oftentimes, as I said before, really fraught with a lot of problems and a lot of difficulties. But, one navigates these dangerous straits as they come, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Now, Jasmin, in the bio note to introduce you, I did mention that you are interested in anarchist approaches to anti-colonialism and anti-nationalism, mm-hmm. especially in the Balkans. Mm-hmm. Could you say mm-hmm. a bit about your research and also how the reception of your doctoral work is happening at York University?
Well, let me say this broadly about the Balkans, specifically as it relates to the notion of colonialism. There is arguably no other region in the world that has for as long had to deal with the issue of colonialism as the Balkans. Beginning literally with the Roman Empire from today. We have had Roman conquests, we've had Byzantine conquests, we have had Ottoman conquests, we have had Austro-Hungarian conquests, and specifically my research is focused specifically on Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is kind of nestled in the heart of the Balkans, mm-hmm. and because of its precarious positions has oftentimes had to even deal with the additional pretensions and colonialist projects of neighboring states, such as Croatia and Serbia and Hungary. Of course, today the region is, colonized and apartheidized by the European and American powers in the region. So that it's close to home in many respects, as it were. And as I do feel that there is something of an indigenous anarchic mentality about the Balkan peoples, even though a few of them would identify as anarchists as such. Mm-hmm. I should absolutely acknowledge that much of my particular recent interest in the subject has been spurned by a good friend and colleague, Andrej Grubicic, who has written on the subject, and he's quite well known, I believe. He writes on ZNet and just recently released an absolutely fantastic book on the subject. So that's where my interest lies in it. As for York specifically, I mean, there are a few people that have dealt with the issue of the Balkans specifically. More broadly, there is, I think, more of a venue for broader anti-colonialist and anti-capitalist and anti-nationalist critiques. Mm-hmm. York is renowned as a bit of a Marxist hotbed. Mm-hmm. So, I think in my experience, I haven't had too much trouble plugging myself into that, although I will fully admit that, the specific focus on the Balkans does mean that there are few and far between experts, mm-hmm. at least at York, though one makes broader linkages.
Sure. And Tammy, how about your research and also how you're locating your project within Anarchist Studies?
Well, my research generally focuses more specifically on anarchist organizing and social movement activity in North America, as well as sort of anarchist political theory. Mm-hmm. In terms of situating that at York, as Jasmin mentioned, York does sort of have a reputation as being sort of a bit of a leftist haven in Canada, definitely very Marxist-oriented. But that said, there is much more of a space at York than I found at other universities to study explicitly anarchist topics and find people in the department who are very sympathetic to that project. Mm-hmm. And also, for me, a really important focus of my research and really my life more generally is connecting research to community organizing and research to activism, and the fact that there are people in the department at York who are professors that are also active in the community mm-hmm. is something that's really valuable to me, because I think as an activist you come to a problem with a certain perspective that's sometimes a little bit different than the way an academic might approach a problem. So I think taking those two approaches together is something that I really value and have been able to do at York.
It sounds great. So that's actually implicating your methodology, it sounds like, and you're attuned to the epistemological distinctions.
Very much so.
Great. Now, with regard to the upcoming conference in Toronto, I just want to acknowledge it's also great to see, since it is the North American Anarchist Studies Network, it's great to see the second conference already take place outside of the U.S. because, as we know all too well, U.S. tends to dominate North America. Could you speak to that in terms of claiming Toronto as that space, and also give us some highlights for the conference? I'd like to know more about the opening panel and group discussion, and maybe some of the highlights for different panels that are going to be offered. I took a look at the schedule, and it looks incredible.
Well, in terms of bringing the conference to Canada, in all honesty, I don't think that was really difficult. I think the big challenge and the big test will be for the next conference actually to be held ideally outside of predominantly English-speaking North America. I'm not quite sure what the logistics would be around organizing a conference in Mexico, but I think there's often that problem of North America being conflated with almost just the U.S. and Canada. In terms of Toronto, well, that's where me and Jasmin live, but I also think it sort of made sense. It sort of made sense in terms of a lot of the things that have been going on in Canada in terms of social movement activity in the past year. The G20 summit was obviously held in Toronto over the summer, and there's just sort of been a growing anarchist presence within the city and growing sort of dominance of explicitly anarchist organizing in the city. So I think it's a good fit to have the conference here coming up in January.
And what about the opening plenary session? I'm interested in the choice of speakers and what they might address. The title of that, I noted, is The Past, Present, and Potential Futures of Anarchism.
In terms of the actual, broad theme for the opening session, I think we tried to leave it as open as we could. I do think a concern for us has become, the post G20 environment in Toronto, and it does speak to both the specific things that have been happening to the community in Toronto, but I think it's also very much something, that is part of a much bigger struggle that has been happening, arguably all throughout the world, dealing with the realities of global capitalism and the role of state repression therein. So we've got a fantastic collection of people that are going to speak to, we will hope, both, the nitty-gritty and minutia of both the local experience within Toronto, but also very much situate that as part of a, as I just said, part of a broader experience of communities all over the world dealing with the G20, dealing with state repression, and dealing with all the similar projects of that nature.
Right. Also noted some of the titles of the panels, including Contemporary Anarchism and the Arts, Anarchist Economics, Transnational Anarchism in the Americas, Greening Anarchy, and Anti-Colonial Anarchism and Indigenous Resistance. What are the highlights for you two? What are you looking forward to?
The highlights for me, at least, I'm excited to see the panels, but have less to do with the specific panels of just the idea of having all these people in the same location for a weekend, and the potential there for people to network, to chat with each other, discuss the work and projects that they're doing, and ideally, potentially discuss the grounds for forming new projects out of that sort of event.
I would very much agree with the sentiment that Tammy just expressed. Just having all these people, in one area will be absolutely delightful. I'm particularly interested in, both you mentioned the panel on anarchist economics. I think that's a field that's kind of been up and coming, as it were, and I'm always interested to see what people have to say on that subject. I'm also very interested in a number of the panels that have to do with basically the kind of diasporic element of anarchism and the rise of anarchist communities in essentially port communities all throughout, for instance, South America and Central America and North America and Europe as well, which, as I said, kind of, on a personal note, does relate to my research and both my personal experience in the world as somebody who would identify as being diasporic, and which is part of my personal attraction to anarchism, because it does, I think, particularly speak to the human condition when it is confronted with the reality of state repression and gross capitalist exploitation that we recognize are both our collectivity and our transient nature. And I'm interested in anything on the subject, and there's going to be a lot of it at this conference, and I'm just, I'm really stoked at the prospect.
Great. Now, could you tell us how listeners who are interested might get more information about all of this in terms of the broader North American Anarchist Studies Network as well as the actual Toronto conference? Again, the dates, listeners, January 15th and 16th, 2011 will be the second annual North American Anarchist Studies Network conference.
You can just reach us at www.naasn.org. That is our main website, where you can find information about both the network and the conference that will be coming up. And I believe right now we're also in the process of creating an archive of the last year's conference, and I imagine any future conferences that will take place. There's a list of, you can see everybody that's involved in the network. You can get involved in the listserv. There's also a Facebook group for those that are on the Facebooks, which I believe is just the second North American Anarchist Studies Network Conference. So, if that thing is to be believed, we're going to have at the very least a couple hundred attendees. But the main website, again, www.naasn.org, is the main repository of any information on both the network and the conference.
Okay, great. Any closing points, either one of you?
None that I can really think of. I'm just really looking forward to seeing people as they trickle into the city for the conference in January.
Pretty much just that. I mean, I'm just really, really excited to see everyone. I know every now and then, even now that the conference is coming together, I'll go ahead and look at the schedule for about the 8 millionth time and think, my God, this is going to be absolutely fantastic. So we're really hoping for a really great turnout, and I think we're confident that we're going to have it, and we're just going to have an amazing time.
Fabulous. Well, thank you both for all your hard work organizing it, and also for taking time to join us on the Horizontal Power Hour. It's great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for taking the time to interview us.
We'll be in touch. This is Horizontal Power Hour, your source for anarchist thought, culture, and politics.